Writer and producer Joseph Mallozzi joins us live on Midnight's Edge in the morning. Good morning, afternoon, evening, whatever it is, where you is. We got through another week. It's Friday. Welcome once again to Midnight's Edge in the morning. I am one of your hosts, Tom Connors. With me is my co-host and the boss man, Mr. Andre himself.
Greetings, Tom. Greetings, everyone else. Greetings, everyone in the chat. And greetings, special guests.
Yeah, sorry for the delay in the start. StreamYards was having a fit, but we got around it. We figured it out. And yeah, as you heard, we have a wonderful guest with us this morning, Joseph Mallozi himself, the writer and producer on many such things as Stargate and Dark Matter. Thank you for joining us this morning.
Thanks for having me.
And also with us is Orville Nation's own PJ. How you doing?
Thanks for having me, guys.
We're very glad to have you guys here this morning, and we're going to talk all kinds of industry news and sci-fi news, genre entertainment news, all kinds of stuff. And of course, if you guys have any questions for Joseph, feel free to send them in the chat, and we'll try to get to a few of those before the show is done. So, Andre, been an interesting week.
It has indeed. It has been an interesting week, both on camera, off camera, in streaming, on The Mandalorian. We're going to get through all of those things. But for the time being, though, we're going to focus mostly on what you have been contributing towards, Joseph Mallozi. And that's going to be a bit of Stargate and all that other goodness. So let's begin with how did you tell us, how did you get started in the industry? Because that's how we usually begin.
Yeah, I originally wanted to be an author. I wanted to write books because I'm a big fan of classic sci-fi like Arthur C. Clarke and Asimov. And, I quickly learned I didn't have the patience, or I thought really the skill to write prose fiction. Although I'd written a prose fiction novel that I gave my former writing partner, and he read, and he's like, "This is terrible," but I think it would make a great script. And I never really thought about script writing before. And then the format is fairly easy to pick up, so I adapted that terrible novel into an equally terrible script. But it really showed me how script writing works, and I decided I wanted to be a script writer, and I ended up sending out a resume to 100 different production companies, hoping to get my foot in the door as a script reader. And I believe maybe a dozen wrote back to say thanks but no thanks, and one wrote back to say they were an animation company, and they said, well, we don't have openings for script readers, but if you would like to write for one of our animated projects, this is what we do. We send you a Bible, you pitch some story ideas, and if we like your idea, we buy it, and we'll pay you to write a script. So the very first script I ever wrote that was produced was an episode of The Busy World of Richard Scarry. Patrick Pig Learns to Talk. I'm sure you're familiar with that one. And I just got my foot in the door in animation, and then I worked my way up from animation to developing for animation, and then teen live action. I did a series called Student Bodies for a 3-season run, and then did a couple of 1-hour action adventure shows, and ultimately landed on Stargate. Because our agent at the time also represented Robert C. Cooper, who was one of the show's co-creators and co-showrunners, along with Brad Wright. And we ended up on the series on SG1 for season 4, with the understanding that the show would go another season, and season 5 would be the end, as was the case with most shows at the time. And we would all go our separate ways. And the rest is history, really. We wrapped season 5, and then we learned we were moving to Sci-Fi Channel for season 6 for one more season. And then we got picked up for a 7th season. And every year that we would get picked up, it was with the understanding this is going to be the last season of the show. And so we would write the season accordingly, assuming it would be the end. And we always thought it was the end, but we always kept on getting picked up until season 10, where I remember talking to actor Chris Judge, who played Teal'c on the show, and he listed all these ideas that made perfect sense why the show would be picked up for an 11th season. And so that was the one season where I thought for sure we would get picked up. And that was the season that the show got canceled. So from Stargate, where my former writing partner and I, Paul Mully, worked our way up from co-producers to ultimately showrunners through the guidance of the amazing Brad Wright and Robert C. Cooper. And from there, I went on to ultimately create and showrun my own series, Dark Matter. In a nutshell, that's it.
Yeah. So now Dark Matter, that was your own original idea?
Yes.
So
and Joe, I'm sorry.
Go ahead. No, go ahead, PJ.
I was just going to say, Joe forgot to say that his writing and his contribution, assuming him and Paul, was so powerful in Stargate that they just kept getting renewed, probably in regards to the writing, how excellent the writing became.
I think the writing all around. I mean, I don't want to say, I thank you for mentioning our contribution, but Brad and Robert had really, and Jonathan Glasner before he left, really set the tone for the series. So when we stepped in season 4, they had really worked out all the bugs on a creative and a production standpoint. So really, it was a well-oiled machine. And I think, I mentioned Brad and Robert, but writers like Carl Binder, Martin Garrow, who's gone on to do Blind Spot and various other projects, Alan McCullough. I mean, there were so many great writers on the series who were also de facto showrunners who've gone on to do other things. Yeah, but you're absolutely right. I think it comes down to the writing and the casting.
I just meant to say that a lot of the favorite episodes that I have are directly related to you guys.
Thank you. I mean, one of the things I loved about Stargate that I brought to Dark Matter was that sense of humor, that undercurrent of humor that I think fans always respond to. So thanks for that.
Yeah, and also you're getting a lot of love in the chat.
Oh,
we have
thank
Presley Snipes that says, Dark Matter was so good, and the ending of season 3 and then no more broke me. Yeah, I'm pretty sure that many feel that way. Lars V. Ding also says, loved Dark Matter.
Thank you.
So yeah, loads of love for you right there. And also Mr. Tickle Trunk, who's a very loyal watcher, says, Joseph is too modest. It took every writer to make it work, and he was part of that.
That's true.
Thank you. I mean,
I have a question. Go ahead. Sorry.
Go ahead.
No, go ahead.
No, I was going to say, I mean, it's the writing, but, as I mentioned, the cast had to bring it to life. And the writing and the acting was really a symbiotic relationship. I mean, you write it on the page, then the actors bring it to life, and they add or subtract what they like, and then you see what they respond to, and you adjust your writing accordingly. And then obviously the entire crew, from costumes to art department, kind of the unsung heroes. I do a blog. I've been blogging for it's like 13 years now. And when I'm in production, I always like to spotlight the different people behind the scenes, so production designers and art directors, and sometimes you forget how many people contribute to the project to make it great. So I thank you for mentioning me, but really it was a group effort.
Now, yeah, my question here is one thing we've covered here on this channel quite a bit for the last few years has been the oncoming streaming wars, which we're basically in the middle of now. And from your point of view, you've worked on both television, like proper, and with your new show, Utopia Falls, is actually for Hulu, right?
Just to qualify, it's not my show, although I did show run. It was created by R.T. Thorne, who's very talented individual. But yes,
my question really doesn't have so much to do with that so much as what is the difference as far as an approach or how you guys have done things as it was to like something like Stargate and Dark Matter as opposed to this where something is for streaming. Is there a difference? I guess is my big question.
To be honest, for me, no, because sci-fi was ultimately cable. And even though, I mean, one of the biggest differences is the episodic order. I mean, a network, I don't know how, you're looking at 24, 25 plus episodes.
Right, for a major show, yeah.
Yeah, whereas, that's how we started. I think we started at 22 episodes per season on SG1, and then they brought it down to 20 episodes a season. But that's what we would do. But years later, when we went back to sci-fi with Dark Matter, it was only a 13 episode order, and that's what you'll see in most of the streamers. You'll see 13, more 10 now, and in some cases 8, even 6.
So is that really the only thing that changed was the amount of episodes? I mean, not even just the approach to the show overall, or any kind of like.
I think it's something that has evolved over time is the type of storytelling. SG1 and Atlantis were very episodic in nature. Even though there were certain character elements or story elements that would play out over the course of a season or more, the adventures were usually close-ended. So it started with the team going off-world and usually ended with the team coming back home, problem solved. When we started to produce Stargate Universe, it was at a time where serialized storytelling was taking hold. So Stargate Universe, even though it had that episodic component, was certainly more serialized than Stargate's SG1 and Atlantis. And when it came time to produce Dark Matter, I really embraced the best of both worlds. It was a show that had a closed story, episodic story, but a lot of ongoing serialized elements. But I find that on streaming, you'll see a lot more serialized storytelling. It's the type of bingeable television or streaming.
So would the writing approach be different in a sense, like in a normal writer's room setting on a show that's 20 some episodes, you may not necessarily, I mean, you probably have an idea where the whole arc is going, but you're not like writing the whole thing out and then going and filming it, as opposed to like something for streaming. It sounds more like you'll actually write it all out, then go film it, as opposed to the other way around. Is that what I'm gathering here?
I would say ideally, because if you've got a smaller episode order, that's hopefully what you do. I know that one of the lessons I learned on Stargate, even though we did 20 episodes a season, and when we were shooting Atlantis and SG1 simultaneously, 40 episodes of television a season, we would always try to get at least a quarter of those episodes written before we went to camera, because production is like a machine. It just eats it up. So that's what I did on Dark Matter. I made sure that we had most of the scripts done before we went to camera. And you think that's a smart way to do it, which it is, and that more production would do it, but they don't. On several occasions on Dark Matter, we had different production personnel, coming and going, and they would always be amazed by the fact that we were always so prepared. Whereas other productions, I would hear horror stories like the cast being emailed the script on the morning they were to shoot a scene, or prepping an episode off an outline on a napkin. It's insane, but it happens more than you think. So in answer to your question, the smaller episode order would ideally give you time to have all your ducks in a row. But I guess it really depends on the showrunner.
All right. Oh, that's interesting to know. Looks like we're getting a lot of love, like we said, for Stargate in the chat here as well.
We also get a few questions from the audience.
Yes.
Yeah, sure.
Chris Foster says, are there any SG1 story arcs that you wish you had revisited? Furlings, Ritu, etc.
The Ritu were before my time, and the Furlings were kind of a landmine, because Robert C. Cooper came up with a name for an alien race, and he called them the Furlings. And he never lived it down, because whenever you think of Furlings, you think of those adorable little Care Bears of outer space. And so I mean, one of the first things he came into my office and asked me to do on my first year of the show was come up with a list of alien names for him, because he's like, I'm through coming up with alien names, and I think I came up with the Jedi and a couple of other names. But that was kind of funny. So the Ritu were before my time. I think the Furlings were before my time. In terms of stories I would like to have revisited, I liked the character of Sarah as Osiris. I thought she was a great villain. I think the fact that she was in the UK made scheduling a little difficult. So that's one of the reasons why we never followed up on her as a character. I know it wasn't my storyline, but Brad had a trilogy planned for the Ashen storyline. The episode was 2001, where they were introduced. 2010, which was this fantastic time travel or alternate world episode, and he had a third story planned that just never came to fruition, sadly. But just in general, I'm a sucker for time travel stories. So anytime I could have done a time travel story, provided I could get it through the writer's room, because they were always very picky about everything making perfect sense, and of course that's what you want. Those were the hardest to do, but always I thought the more satisfying.
By the way, there's been a lot of chatter about the Shen episodes with all the vaccination going on.
Yeah, I didn't even think about that till now. Yes.
And just so you guys know, so everybody knows, one of the Shen, it's a spoiler, I guess, but it has to do with aliens providing a certain vaccine for the human kind.
And
so
not all is as it seems.
Yeah, that was oddly prescient. Is that the word I'm looking for? I think so. Yeah, it's strange when fiction suddenly becomes relevant in ways that one never had anticipated. So that's pretty awesome.
So,
yeah. We have other questions from the audience as well. Mills, another loyal watcher from South Africa, actually. So we have quite the international following, not just in the panel, but also out there in the audience. He's wondering, are you working on Brad's new show?
Brad does not have a new show yet. As I mentioned, he was in talks with MGM about a potential new Stargate series, and I have actually nothing to do with that. I'm involved only insofar as I'm a friend of Brad's, and he's developing something, and hopefully going to take it out and land it somewhere. As for when production begins, who knows at that point? But I will not assume anything.
Was it Brad who said, or was it Brad or somebody else, Joe, that said that they were approximately at the 5th chevron of getting?
That was actually me.
Oh, that was you.
That was
okay.
actually me, and someone asked, what's the progress? And I said 5th chevron locked in terms of the progress. And people have been asking, any more chevrons locked? And sadly, no, because of the pandemic, things have kind of ground to a halt. For various reasons in Hollywood. I mean, I have 2 shows I was going to go out and pitch in October, and I've had to put everything on hold until January, maybe, just simply because of the pandemic and directly as a result of the pandemic and how it's affected production, but it's also how it's affected certain studios in that there's been a huge turnover in personnel. And that's still ongoing. So everyone is kind of in a holding pattern right now.
Yeah. It changes everything. On that note, Winsome Hacks also wonders, scariest SF episode any show to watch post-COVID. Well, let's stick with Stargate to begin with.
Stargate, I will go with Whispers. I would love to tell you which season and what episode number, but off the top of my head, I can't remember. Is that Stargate Atlantis, Whispers? In terms of horror episode, horror television, that's a really good question. What do you like?
I'd go with the OG Stand. Like the new one, I'm not too impressed with, but they did a pretty good job on that miniseries back in the day. And that's very current. Yeah. And we got another question in here, or actually it says BK109 says, just wanted to thank Mr. Mallozzi for this bit from 200. Never underestimate your audience. They're generally sensitive, intelligent people.
Yeah.
WHP. I normally can read. Don't let that fool you.
Yeah. No, that is a quote from the episode 200 where it was just one of the craziest episodes we've ever done at SG1. And that actual line was written by Robert C. Cooper, who is a very funny guy and very respectful of the fans, obviously.
And it was Ben Browder, right? Who said it? I think.
Probably, yeah.
Yeah. And then I also have a question, because on the original series, then you came in relatively late in the game, as in everything was established. But in the later series, what role did you have in establishing the Bible, the characters, everything that went into forming the series from scratch? How big a role did you have in the different projects, and how was that transition?
Yeah, Brad and Robert were the co-creators of the series. So they came up with the premise for Atlantis and universe. They came up with the characters, and our involvement, and I refer to Paul and mine and Carl Binders and Martin Garrow's, we read all the material, we gave notes on the material, and then when it came time to developing, writing the scripts past the pilot, as a group, we were always in the room developing the characters, developing the storylines.
All right, excellent. And we also have another question from Mills, who also sent us a donation of 35 South African rands, donkey. Would you have returned to the Tolan down the road, or are they dead? Also, how do you feel about negative fan feedback to SGU, which just so happens to be Mills' second favorite show?
Regarding the Tolan, I always say that no one ever really dies or stays dead in sci-fi. So even though their home world was attacked and seemingly destroyed, I assume there were other Tolan out there. So that was always a possibility. One of the great things about Stargate in general, and SG-1 in particular, is that we'd established such a great, rich mythology that, we could have gone on for like another 20 seasons and explored so many other aspects. As for negative fan feedback to SGU, at the end of the day, fans, of course, are entitled to their opinion. They're, they invest their time in a show, and I assume that they were used to a certain tone for SG-1 and Atlantis, and Stargate Universe was different for them. Before I even actually got the Stargate gig, I was fairly active online, kind of checking out the fan communities. Not really vocal, but just seeing, getting a sense of them, and it's something that I've continued to this day. I'm fairly active in social media and keeping in touch with the fans, either through my blog or on Twitter, or I'll occasionally hit the Reddit, the Stargate subreddits, and upload photos, behind the scenes photos. So we're very respectful of the fans, and as long as they keep it respectful, I don't really, I think criticism is good.
I also would like to mention that you are here right now, live with the audience. Massive respect for that, and I agree completely. Like, if you treat the fans with respect, then the fans will treat you with respect back, even if not everyone may necessarily agree with every single decision.
Right.
Then, of course, just the act of treating them with respect is going to make a huge difference. That is something that we certainly see in our community. With the creators that deal with,
If I can just add, Andre, that not just Joe coming on Orville Nation, but if you go through YouTube, Joe has been very, very accessible to the fans, like for years. So.
Indeed, there are many creators that could learn from this. So massive kudos.
To be honest, fandom can be a double-edged sword. They're very passionate. And if they like something, it's great. But if they don't like something, it can be difficult. So I understand why maybe some creators would prefer not to sort of wade into those waters.
But I think that those that don't maybe have a reason not to, because they suspect that the fans aren't going to be so responsive to them. But we have more questions. Mr. Tickletrunk, for $2 Canadian wonders, what's your process if starting a totally new IP?
If totally new, you mean an original idea. It really depends. In the case of Dark Matter, I had been sitting on the idea for, want to say 5 or 6 years. And then when the time came to take it out, I had a pilot script. And usually what you do is you go out with a pilot script and series overview, and you pitch it. And if somebody likes the idea, they will buy it. But I actually got my start in animation. And I was a manager of animation development for a while. And my job was to look for properties. And one of the things that I quickly became aware of is that it didn't matter how good a project was. The buyers always wanted IP. And by that I mean an established property, intellectual property. So rather, if it's based on a book, if it's based on a comic book, something that preceded it. And so for Dark Matter, I ended up reaching out to Dark Horse, Keith Goldberg at Dark Horse, and I pitched him Dark Matter as a comic book series that we could launch. And then depending on how it did, we could actually take the comic book series as an IP and shop it as a series. And he loved the idea at the time. I don't think they had done any television. I believe Dark Matter was the first show, but they've gone on to do like some amazing. They do Umbrella Academy and a whole bunch of great shows. And so that's what we did. I took the first, what would have been the first 2 episodes of Dark Matter, adapted them to the comic book format. It was 4-issue arc. And when the time came to pitch it, Jay Firestone, who's the president of Prodigy Pictures, had the comic book or the graphic novel, to go out with. And what that did was really helpful. I always say that when you pitch a show, some executives will imagine the worst possible follow through on your idea. But if they have something visual like a comic book, they can actually see it come to life. And so that's what we did with Dark Matter. And we ended up selling the show off the IP and the idea. And then from there, I went, back and reverse engineered the pilot script and moved forward.
And the brilliant thing with that is that it wasn't just a 4-issue.
I think we lost Andre.
I can hear him.
Yeah, I'm here. Can the rest of you hear me?
Yep,
I can hear Andre.
Okay, well, just me then. Sorry.
Yeah, okay. No, anyway, I was about to say about Dark Matter, the comic. The brilliant thing about that was that it wasn't just a 4-issue arc. It was also released as a trade paperback called Rebirth, which of course gives it a whole new life for the trade paperback audience that don't necessarily read individual issues. Is that an approach that you would generally recommend to those trying to get into the industry? Because that way, then you can kind of like say, look, comic book property.
Yeah, I wouldn't really recommend it as an approach. To be honest with you, I love comic books quite a bit. I mean, I do read, and I think comic books are their own thing. And in my mind, I mean, obviously, establishing the IP was important, but I would have loved to have continued the Dark Matter story as a comic book. So, in my head, I think of comic books. I occasionally come up with comic book ideas, and now I'm at the point where I feel as though if I ever did an original comic book idea, I might actually be kind of reluctant to necessarily adapt it to television until I had felt satisfied and in having the creative freedom to sort of let the comic book run its course.
Yeah, I understand. It's a completely different thing. We also got a great question from Exia Valens, who says, what was the transition like going from Richard Dean Anderson to Ben Browder and Claudia Black?
It was actually a surprisingly smooth transition. I mean, when we started Stargate, Richard Dean Anderson was Richard Dean Anderson, the star, and after so many years, I think Rick wanted to spend more time with his family. So we found ways to sort of lessen the load and have it appear in less episodes or appear less in the existing episodes. And reach the point, every year Rick would say, I think this might be the last year I would do it, and then he would always come back, and then finally decided, that's it. I think I'm done. And so we were wondering, well, what are we going to do? And I'm a big Farscape fan, and I love Ben and Claudia's work. And we ended up casting Claudia in an episode, an earlier episode. But Brad and Robert were going to have a conversation with Sci-Fi, and I said, pitch them Ben Browder. I know they love Ben Browder. I love Ben Browder. He would be perfect. And so they pitched Ben to Sci-Fi, and Sci-Fi loved him. And I remember Ben watching at the time it was something like, what was it, like all 9 seasons of SG-1, 180 somewhat episodes to get up to speed before he actually landed on the show. And we originally pitched for both Ben and Claudia to be series regulars starting in season 9, but the network was like, well, no, this would be too much like Farscape, which is ridiculous. Aside of the fact that they were the 2 lead actors on Farscape, their characters, especially Claudia's character, were totally different. And so we said, okay, and Ben became a regular, and Claudia, I think, had like a 4 or 5 episode deal. And when those episodes started to deliver, the Claudia episodes, the network changed its mind and was like, well, okay, let's make her a series regular. But at that point, the ship had already sailed, and we said, okay, if we get a 10th season pickup, we're going to make her a regular, and that's what we did. So from a writing standpoint, it was a lot of fun. I thought those characters were a lot of fun to write for, especially the Vala character. I kind of like, kind of the lovable rogue.
I remember you guys, I think, was it an episode with, Martin the alien producer?
Yeah.
Like he even, like they're reading a script and it's like they're talking about bringing in new people just to take over the lead role. And
yeah,
like,
he essentially pitches Farscape, and we did a Farscape parody, and I wrote that little scene as a Farscape fan. And I remember I had written Ben as Crichton and Michael Shanks as Starks, and Ben and Michael coming to me and saying, I think it would be fine if we reverse the role, and Michael played Crichton and Ben would play Stark. And so that's what we did. And Michael Shanks as Ben Browder as Crichton is really the highlight for that particular episode for me.
Excellent. We also have some more questions about dark matter. Rodney McKay says, was there ever a Netflix option to continue dark matter?
Absolutely.
While others express frustration in the chat over
yes.
over the cliffhanger.
If you guys think you were frustrated, believe me, I was even more frustrated. No, actually, we did go to Netflix, but they declined. You note that for the most part, shows on Netflix, original Netflix series, are 3 and out. It's very rare that they go past 3 episodes. And one thing I keep on saying is that Netflix is a subscription model, so they're always looking for new content to drive the new subscriber base. And in the case of Dark Matter, they already had the first 3 seasons, so they in their mind they already had the Dark Matter fan base.
Yeah, that's something we always hear, is that they really, they all they care about is like those first few seasons. Once they're done, they're over with. They move along. Like, so it's seemingly surprising when they do go beyond that.
Mm-hmm.
Mills has another question here. I know you haven't read the comics or books, but excuse me, would you be interested in pitching books, comics, or audio plays that could canon continue? That would be canon continuations.
I assume you're talking about Dark Matter. Audio plays, I don't really know anything about audio plays, so probably not. Books, as I said, I'm more of a screenwriter than a writer of prose fiction, and someone actually did approach me about writing Dark Matter books, but A, I'm not interested, and B, I'm really not interested in someone else writing the story I had planned. Comic books actually would have been an interesting option. I think we reached out to Dark Horse, but they were not really interested in continuing the storyline. So kind of 3 strikes on those 3.
Have you considered reaching out to anyone other than Dark Horse? Like, for instance, Image, which is fully creator-owned. Is that something that you would be willing to pursue, or should fans just let go once?
No, actually, it's something that, it again, really comes down to scheduling and time. I mean, season 3 ends on a cliffhanger. What I did for the fans was, before we got the cancellation notice, we were actually in the writer's room spinning ideas for season 4. So what I did for the fans was on my blog, I ended up breaking down the first 3 episodes of season 4. So you know how the cliffhanger was resolved and what we had planned for those first 3 episodes. So you can find them on my blog. Just do a search for 4.01, 4.02, and 4.03. Call them Dark Matter virtual episodes, which is great. One of the fans actually, I provide little stills that I drawn from other episodes to give a little visual appeal. And then one of the fans actually made a video of the first 2 episodes of kind of the breakdowns, which is kind of fun.
Excellent. Yeah, so there is that option for closure. Just to see how the story can say.
Andre, can I ask a question?
Sure.
Just a follow-up question to an early, to 3 or 4 questions ago, Joe, about original IP. Is it enough for somebody who's starting to register with a Writers Guild to protect your stuff? Is that enough?
Sure. I mean, you could just do the cheap way and frankly mail yourself your manuscript and leave it sealed.
True.
But I know there's a lot of talk about this, the theft of intellectual property and script, but I think it's actually very rare, just because I think productions are hyper aware of the consequences. I mean, and this is why when we're on Stargate, we could never read any fan fiction. I mean, fans would be like, "Oh, I'd love to write. Could you read my Stargate script or Stargate story?" And we were like, "No, we can't do it, just for legal reasons." And I'm sure it's the same for most any show.
Yeah, that's the recurring advice that we have always heard is never ever send an idea, send a full script. That's much easier.
Yeah, at the end of the day, you really can't copyright an idea.
Exactly, but you can copyright the script. So to anyone out there that wants to protect themselves, for one thing, like that theft isn't nearly as common as you might be afraid of. But to protect yourself, have a full spec script rather than just an idea. Ideas are cheap, but putting it into a full script, that's a different matter. And then we also have Master Clockwork, who says SGU's fault is a lack in identity early on. Felt too much like Battlestar, but it came into its own as it went on, and it's a pity it got cancelled. Yeah,
I mean, it's interesting. Like I said, I tend to spend time on the Stargate Reddit, and someone brought up the fact that, at the time when Battlestar, it was on the heels of Battlestar, so there were obvious comparisons, but he kind of revisited SGU free of the Battlestar connections, and he at it new. He actually reappreciated the series as kind of a standalone. And one of the things people mentioned, all the fans mentioned, is it was slow in the beginning and got really good in season 2. And I would argue that's the way with actually most shows. I mean, you're setting up in season 1, but one of the fans on Reddit pointed out again that season 2 is so satisfying because of all the work you do in season 1 and building out the characters and the kind of the story and the scenario. So when the payoffs come, they're all that more. They just land all that much harder.
And you had some great characters in SGU.
Yeah. I mean, we had an amazing cast.
Indeed. And moving on is to something completely different. This is more of an industry question, which many that follows this channel are interested in. ActionCom asks, what has been the effect of the internet on the industry? So this one goes way back. From the dot-coms of the 90s all the way to present-day social media. What did you see?
I mean, the way...
Which trends did you see in different times?
The way we make television is totally different. The way they sell television is totally different. I mean, back then it was all on on network, and I mean, if you wanted to watch something, it was usually on like whatever the big four, big three, the big four. As the internet got big, streaming got big. So suddenly you didn't have to wait till Saturday night to watch your episode. You can actually, go and download it illegally online, which began to sort of eat into the bottom line of a lot of production companies who kind of scrambled, and ultimately it gave rise to, you mentioned the streaming wars, the Netflix of this world, and this almost kind of this immediacy now where rather than going week to week, unless you're still watching network television, which is losing viewership, on a weekly basis, you can watch whatever you want at your own pace, and so I mean it's just totally transformed the television experience from a viewing standpoint, certainly from a production standpoint.
Yeah, that's quite a difference. We also see the change in relation to movies, for instance.
Mm-hmm.
That prior to the internet, certainly movies were quality, whereas television, again, this is just my observation, whereas television was like more cookie cutter, whereas now that is reversed. As of late, movies have been so expensive that they can't take any risks, whereas the compelling storytelling you find on TV and on the small screen. I wonder, have you noticed like any increased demands in terms of like the quality output over the years to that end? Like, for instance, say from when you first started out with the original Stargate series to up to current times, is there like any? Have you noticed any difference in requirements from the showrunners and the studio?
Not really in terms of requirements. I mean, I notice obviously there's a lot more demand for a lot more product, but on the other hand, as I mentioned, people they love the IP, and they love. They like original ideas, provided they're from an established, like a J.J. Abrams type of individual. So, I mean, I would say you would think it would be easier. Things have gotten easier, but they haven't really. I think it's equally tough to sell a show.
Yeah, I can imagine. And then we also have a question from Nuclear Simeon, who says, "Hey, Joe Mallozi, love Stargate so much. Did you ever have any plans to introduce or deal with the Furlings?"
Absolutely not. In fact, actually, the fans would always ask about the Furlings. So in episode 200, we did a little parody bit where we actually meet the Furlings, and sure enough, they look like Ewoks. And then the planet gets destroyed, and that's like the last we hear of them. So everything in 200 was kind of a dreamlike fantasy fun element, except for that the Furlings are really dead, so you can never ask about them again.
Yeah, so everyone make note of that. Never ask for the Furlings ever again.
So there's not a Furling script sitting at your desk.
No, that Furling movie that
movie.
Yeah, and Michael Connor says that he would support a dark matter Indiegogo. So there is absolutely demand for a continuation.
Thank you.
Beyond what can be found out there already.
I actually have a question from outside of the chat.
Yeah.
One of our friends, Matthew Kadish, wants to know, he's a big fan. Ask him what happened to Eli and the other SG crew after the series ended. I'm curious if they had plans for another season.
We never actually got usually, we would spin ideas for the ensuing season at the end of the season we were working on. But we actually never really got a chance to actually sit down and spin story ideas for season 3. Because actually before we could convene the writer's room, we got word of the cancellation. Over on my blog, if you do like a search, I'm not sure what I think it was SGU, that it was SGU, what might have been and what could have been. I actually break down the possible storylines we could have pursued. And at that point, we hadn't even really discussed with Brad, so they're as good as fan fiction. But if you're curious, those were the ideas I had that I would have brought to the writers' room.
Very cool. And Mills has another question. Do you feel toxic creatives is a thing where they try to alienate the audience? Or do you think it's genuine incompetence for some picks? I think that this is maybe something that is more relevant to other series, like as recently has been happening on Star Trek and Doctor Who, more than anything that
I'm not sure
particular.
I don't really follow the question. I'm not sure what toxic creators. I don't think anyone creator sets out to alienate an audience. I think they always go in with the best intentions of what they assume our audience will respond to, and sometimes they are accurate, and other times they are not. So I don't know, but I mean, in answer to your question, in as is the case in any line of work, there are talented people and there are untalented people, and just because you're good doesn't mean you're working, and just because you're bad doesn't mean you're not working. So, I mean, I don't, make that in reference to any particular show. I mean, that's the business.
And you might even say that somebody who is good might just not be a good fit for a project sometimes.
Yeah, exactly. I mean, we had so many writers pitch for Stargate, and they were really solid writers. I mean, we read their stuff, but they just didn't sync with the Stargate tone, or they just didn't get the show. And I mean, it happens, and it's no reflection on an individual's skill as a writer. It's just they're just not right. They're just not a good fit.
Yeah, let's stick with that. And Mark's 47 says, "I'd love to know how you felt about SG1's Asgard theme popping up in Thor Ragnarok." That would be Marvel's Thor Ragnarok, and I imagine you must have seen that movie on account of the Iron Man movie behind, or Iron Man poster behind you.
Yeah, Thor Ragnarok is actually one of my favorite Marvel movies.
I love that one too.
The sense of humor in that, it makes sense, which is a big plus for me. So yeah, and yeah, I mean, I've heard the both the SG1 theme and the Asgard theme in several movies. It's kind of nice. Makes me wistful.
I got a question that kind of goes back to Stargate. I got to imagine at some point you guys thought about, or the possibility came up to do something in animation, because I got to imagine the idea, it lends itself to animation so well. Was that something that ever came up during your tenure, or was that just...
It never came up during my tenure, but I believe they did do a Stargate SG1 animated series, Stargate Infinity.
Okay, see, I'm not aware of that one.
Yeah, yeah. You can track those down. We had nothing to do with it. The writers had nothing to do with it. It was just a completely alternate production.
I just know out of the era that the movie came out of, like, everything got a Saturday morning cartoon.
Right,
so I'm just surprised it didn't.
Yeah, it did, as it turns out.
Yeah, just not a Saturday morning one in quotations. Yeah.
Right.
Yeah. And Mills had another question saying, in the SGU comics, Eli can't fix his pod, goes exploring and finds ancients who built Destiny on board. Was this part of the plan in the writer's room?
No. People ask me about the SGU comic books, and I actually don't know anything about the SGU comics. I didn't read them. The people who wrote the SGU comic books were not part of the writer's room. So it's, and people are always like, well, is it canon? And, I would say, sure, you can consider it canon. However, if a series ever comes back, it will probably become uncanon.
Right. If you ever go on the same grounds again.
Right. Yeah. I'm sure like something like Brad is not going to be handcuffed. We're going to start spinning a story and we're going to be like, actually, you can't do that because they already resolved that in the comic book. I love to be in a room when Brad is presented with that quandary.
Yeah, it actually would be great to like film the reaction if someone says, "Okay, now we're going to do this," and someone says, "Wait, comic book did otherwise, so you can't go there."
Right.
No, like here's like the thing: the comic book is headcanon until it's rejected on screen, and then it's not even that, or you're going to have a hard time maintaining that it's even that. Sander Hammerslag has a question. How was it to work with actors like Colmini and Robert Picardo? Or did you even get to work with them when you were writing their parts?
In the case of Colmini, not really. I did not get down to set, but he was amazing. He was terrific. Robert Picardo is actually now actually a good friend of mine. He's, I keep in touch with a lot of the cast from Stargate, but Bob is a guy who, if I'm in LA, I will give him a call and we'll go out for dinner. And he was in Toronto a couple of years ago, and we went out for dinner, and he would always come to our place in Vancouver. And he was a character actually we cast as Richard Woolsey, who was kind of a over officious pain in the ass. And then over the course of his episodes, we instilled him with a bit of humor to begin to be likable in kind of an annoying way, sort of like Rodney McKay was in the very beginning. And then when Amanda Tapping left to go do Sanctuary, we had an opening on Stargate Atlantis for a leader. And so I just called Bob up and I'm like, hey, would you like to take over command of the of Atlantis? And he was like, sure. And we closed the deal in like a day, and he ended up being a series regular, and we ended up redeeming the character. He came like really full circle in Atlantis and became really kind of a beloved character, and that had a lot to do with Bob, who is just one of the most talented, nicest guys I've ever worked with.
I love the way his character would just sit in his room with a suit on and drink wine.
Yeah. And then, Cecile, we have a few more questions.
Sure.
And just before we get to the ones we just saw, Alan Paxton says, "Can't believe I nearly missed this." Before I continue, everyone, please hit like and feel free to share, because YouTube doesn't always do a very good job advertising that we are in fact doing live streams, even when we have distinguished guests such as now. So feel free to help share the link. And also remember, every Monday, Wednesday, and Friday at 9 a.m. LA time is when we do this. So always be there to check it out, even if YouTube does not send a notification. But Paxton continues saying, "Grew up on Stargate SG1/SGA. Still believe that SGU was shaping up to be something really special in its third season."
I agree. And in fact, actually, we had received word that we were going to get a pickup for a third and final season. And so we kind of assumed we were coming back until we weren't. So that offer kind of went away. So I was equally disappointed.
Yeah, I think many were. And R. Farr says, "Inspired choice hiring Robert Carlyle, who is a great actor."
He is. Actually, Robert is great. I remember when he first, came into Brad's office. He asked Brad, "Well, how, what level of Scottish accent do you want me to do?" And he did actually something like 5 levels from discernible to highly indiscernible. So when you hear him on screen, his Scottish accent is a lot less pronounced than he actually speaks in real life. I remember I would run into him at the lunch line and I would sort of engage him in conversation. And half the time I didn't understand what he was saying just because his accent was so thick.
Yeah, that's pretty good. Jonathan wonders, or rather he says, spent my teen to early adult years watching SG-1 and Atlantis. Who were your favorite cast members to work with? Again, and then I would like to throw on, how many did you actually get to work with? Rather, how many were you just writing the lines for?
I mean, I obviously got to work with all of them. I mean, SG-1 will always remain near and dear to my heart because it was the first big production I ever worked on, and I ended up what was like maybe 7 years on the show. So I mean, the cast was great. Michael and Amanda, especially, I keep in touch with to this day. In terms of Atlantis, Jason Momoa was actually the one actor who would come to my office and pitch me ideas, and it was his, because of him coming to the office to pitch my ideas, I ended up writing 2 episodes, Reunion and Broken Ties. I remember actually him coming into my office because he wanted to shave his lose the dreads because they were just becoming like an issue for him, and he had this idea for a scene where Ronan would go dark side and shave his head, and that's how the idea of Broken Ties came in. And we pitched the network, hey, Jason's going to lose the dreads, and we're going to do this head shaving scene, and the network was like, no, his dreads are too iconic, so we ended up having to wig him for I think that final season to varying degrees of success, I would say. But it's too bad because it would have been a great scene. And, Jason, of all the Atlantis cast, was the one who's always kind of coming in with ideas and kind of wanting to push his character, which, I always kind of appreciated.
On the note of Jason, it's funny that he wanted to shave the dreads because when he was auditioning for the role of Conan the Barbarian, he refused to shave his beard until after he was confirmed to have actually gotten the role. And that also leads to a question that is now gone from the screen, but that we had earlier, or rather a comment, I should say, which was, how did you feel watching Jason Momoa as Aquaman back in Atlantis, given where he started?
I'm going to disappoint you, but I did not see Aquaman. But I did see the trailer, and he looked amazing. He always looks amazing, and he's just, I think he was perfect for that role. I think he's perfect in a lot of the roles he plays. Jason was always kind of a big kid, and I mean that in a wholly positive way. He's always, a great upbeat presence on set and behind the scenes, and I think that's continued to this day. So very, very happy for him, very proud of him.
Indeed. And we also had another question regarding the comics, to follow up from that discussion, from Cant3N, who says, so were the SGU comics based off any existing writer's notes, or did they write something completely on their own for those? Because he wonders if he should.
Yeah, the writer's room never convened, so there were never any ideas, so they did not work off any writer's notes. I can't speak for Brad or Robert. They may have actually reached out to Brad and Robert and said, hey, we're thinking of doing this, and Brad and Robert would have maybe said, like, sure. But to the best of my knowledge, there was no the SGU comics are not a continuation of anything we had planned in the room.
Joe, did you want to? We saw on Twitter like yesterday or 2 days ago that one of the directors for Dark Matter had passed.
Oh yeah, yeah. Surprise! You're kind of shocking. Steve DeMarco, who directed 3 episodes of Dark Matter, heard was it the night before last, had passed away suddenly. And actually, it's you're very sad. I mean, we'd worked on Dark Matter, and we had kept in touch since. And he was an older director, and he was having trouble, I think, landing work in kind of this environment, and which is too bad, because if you watch the episodes, he does, he always did really good work. So that's kind of sad. I was going to bring it up on our next Dark Matter podcast, Orville Nation episode. But yeah, very sad.
Yeah, indeed. And ActionCom, who previously wondered about how the internet had changed writing, he says, in reference to my internet question, how did the fan/show relationship change over time? How was fan feedback processed?
There's a very fine line. There are certain writers and producers who just won't go online. Like my writing partner, Paul, completely unaffected by the internet, because he just doesn't follow any of the fandoms. I would follow the fandom, and it was always interesting for me to see what worked for the fans, what didn't. But at the end of the day, I mean, you've got to be aware that, you're writing a show that hopefully will appeal to the fandom if you're doing something like an established IP. But on the other hand, you kind of don't want to take dictation as well, because the fandom is splintered. And I remember when we were on Stargate SG-1, there were the shippers who shipped O'Neill and Carter and wanted to see those two together. Then there were the slashers who shipped Daniel and O'Neill and didn't want to see Carter and O'Neill together, because that would mean that it would totally undermine their relationship. So, I mean, it's interesting and fodder for fan fiction, but as writers, you can't really let fandom dictate what you can and can't do. I mean, it's always great to be informed and to reward fans whenever possible, but as writers, you have to sort of hopefully see your original vision through.
Speaking of original vision, Mills also wonders, if Atlantis were brought back, do you think you could get Jason back, or would that be too pricey? Would it be too pricey to bring back most of the cast today?
Yeah, in all seriousness, I don't think if we ever, did a new Stargate series, I don't think it would be a continuation of any of the other shows. It would probably be a new series with new characters existing within the established Stargate universe that would allow for a lot of these familiar faces to maybe do guest spots or appear over time. In terms of getting Jason, I think probably that ship has sailed. Besides the cost, I think Jason has gone on record as saying that he had a great time on Atlantis, but it's he's kind of put it behind him now. So unlikely we would get Ronan back.
Mills has go ahead, Andre.
Yeah, no, you take it up.
So Mills has a follow-up here. Says, was SGU canceled due to MGM bankruptcy or ratings related?
On the surface, it would look like ratings, because the ratings were down, and the show, due to the ratings, was going to end either with where it did, season 2, or with a third and final season. I don't think the MGM bankruptcy, it's certainly complicated, muddying the waters. I don't think they really had anything to do with
one had nothing to do with the other. The cancellation. I think really we were heading down that road anyways, and I think there were other issues that brought about the cancellation, is what I want to say. Yeah, well, it's my understanding from some things I've heard that MGM isn't the only ones involved with Stargate anyway, correct? Like there are some other people that do have some holdings to it, or no?
No, not
it's
really.
Just MGM only? Okay.
Yeah.
All right. That was what I was curious about.
Ball is in their court. Yeah.
I've kind of asked you this question before, but Tom and Andre, Midnight's Edge talks about it a lot. They talk a lot about James Bond and MGM.
Mm-hmm.
there's the reason I'm asking is because there's so much of their audience has been on this point.
Mm-hmm.
Does the success or failure of another franchise affect how MGM looks at Stargate?
I can't speak for MGM. I would think not. If I don't see how like the success of, let's say, a James Bond would affect Stargate. On the other hand, the only way a failure of a James Bond entry could affect Stargate is if it would make executives cautious about how to proceed with the franchise. But I would argue that given it's been like 8 years since Stargate went off the air, and we're seeing reboots of everything from Gossip Girl to Full House to Walker, Texas Ranger to True Blood to Battlestar. I have a hard time believing they could be any more cautious.
All right. And Alan Paxton wonders, has Joseph ever thought of where he would take Stargate if the opportunity at a revival presented itself? And what would that elevator pitch be?
The answer to that is no, because I would not be presumptuous enough to sort of step into that role. That is really much sort of very much, Brad and Robert were the co-creators of Atlantis and Universe, and Brad was a co-creator of all 3 Stargates. And if anyone's going to bring back Stargate and come up with an elevator pitch, it would be him. So out of respect for Brad and Robert, I would not be the one to come up with an idea. But I mean, I will say in a general sense, what I would love to see would be a series that would appeal to new viewers of the franchise who wouldn't need to know anything about Stargate before tuning in, and yet at the same time offer a reward for long established fans in the way of maybe familiar faces, maybe a Rodney McKay, maybe a Samantha Carter, putting in appearances here and there, maybe the resolution of some storylines.
That's very fair. And can 3... Yeah, sorry, carry on, Tom.
I was just curious. Was there any involvement at all from Dean Devlin or Roland Emmerich on the series at any time, or was that just they were just the movie only, and then MGM just after that was the only ones in control?
Yeah, no, it was Jonathan Glasner and Brad Wright, right. SG1 throughout, and Devlin and Emmerich. We had no involvement in the television series.
Didn't you share one? Is it my imagination? Didn't you share one time, Joe, that Kurt Russell had actually been on set?
Yeah, actually, he was shooting. Was it 3,000 Miles to Graceland on the lot? And so he came and he visited the set, and he actually was very impressed with the Stargate. The fact that it actually did spin, because apparently his Stargate did not spin.
There you go. There's some difference in production value there. Yeah,
because I was just kind of curious if there was any real connection between the movie universe and the TV universe as far as production wise.
No, not from a production standpoint.
And Cant3N wonders, did the galaxy hopping element make SGU tough to write long-term arcs for, or was it more of a blessing to try brand new stories as it went along?
I really love the galaxy hopping element. It certainly was. It did make it challenging to a certain degree. I mean, on SG1, we after so many seasons, we had laid so much groundwork in terms of mythology, in terms of story arcs, that we could always go back and dip into those stories. SG1 was all new, so it was challenging, but it was also creatively very satisfying.
And then Diego Flores sends in a question here, or a statement. It's a question. Have you ever thought of taking SG into a type of movie universe, self-contained stories, but with a clear connective tissue, not a cinematic universe, but more like one of the movies? Now, of course, I know you don't have control over this, but if you were in this position, I guess that's the question Diego would like to know.
Yeah, I know. I love the idea. And as I said, I mean, I defer to Brad, but given the opportunity, yeah, I think that would be a great idea.
All right.
And Joe,
Go ahead.
if I may ask, because I know there's a lot of people in the audience who do this kind of thing, what are the fan film policies for Stargate and for that matter, Dark Matter?
That's a very good
With regard to Stargate, I have no idea. But I mean, MGM is a big studio, and I'm sure they keep kind of on top of that. With regard to Dark Matter, I mean, it's only Prodigy Pictures, and to be honest with you, I don't think they really mind. Or I was going to say care, which is kind of true, but and neither do I. It's always nice to see fans being creative and coming up with new things.
Sure.
I got to imagine, unless somebody's obviously making some kind of profit off of something, they wouldn't have any issues. Yeah.
Yeah, I would think.
Go. And then Mills comes in with another one. Thank you so much. Where do you see the main characters today?
Oh, it really depends on which characters.
That's a broad swap.
Yeah, I mean, I think Teal'c is leading the Free Jaffa. Daniel Jackson is back to teaching. General Carter is probably in command of the new Stargate command, and then goes home to her husband Jack O'Neill, who's homebody and makes delicious spaghetti dinners. I think in terms of Atlantis, I think Atlantis has found its way back to the Pegasus Galaxy, and the fight continues to this day. And who did I leave out? Cameron Mitchell and Valor are still part of an SG team somewhere out there. And in terms of universe crew, they're still in stasis aboard the Destiny. And of course, basically, they're the pods are, I don't know how many how many hundreds of years old. So they're not, in my mind, perfectly preserving them. I think, if and when they do come out of stasis, how many years from now, it'll be almost like, I don't know, maybe 8, even 9 years have passed, it will look like. But they're still out there traveling the galaxy. And I think Eli is maybe still working on the solution, but also working out a lot. I don't know if you've seen David Blue lately, but he has gotten super fit.
Totally.
I think you really got your super chats worth there, Mills. Thank you so much. Vector One sends in a question. Any Stargate games in the works to build hype?
I believe there is a role-playing game out there.
Wasn't it Dial the Gate, I think, that had
yes.
Walton numbers?
Yeah, actually, the Dial the Gate team actually ended up playing the role-playing game and having a lot of fun. I think Wyvern Games is
That's it.
Yeah.
All right. And then Mr. Tickle Trunk has a question here. Curious if you're working on anything right now.
I am working on several things. I have actually 2 sci-fi projects I'm going out with in January. One of them is they're both actually time travel shows. One of them is a show called Timescape that I've been developing for almost like 2 years now. And if you like the funny episodes of Stargate, like if you liked Window of Opportunity, if you liked Dark Matters, All the Time in the World, or Isn't That a Paradox, this is the series for you. It's kind of a sci-fi comedy we'll be going out with. We're actually going out to a well-established actor to try to get him attached before we go out. I am actually working on 2 other original sci-fi ideas. One is a near-future android murder mystery, and the one I'm working on now is this crazy far future, near-future sci-fi series that combines gaming, anime, science fiction, and K-pop, which is kind of wild. And next year I will start adaptation of a fantasy book series. I can't say what it is yet, because the official announcement hasn't been made yet. But I had a great conversation with the author, and we're very excited to move forward with that. So, and then there were a couple of other things, balls in the air. But I mean, who knows? And like I was saying, there was another project that just a script I wrote 7 years ago that I just got a call about or an email about yesterday. That looks like it's under serious consideration at one of the streamers. So we'll see how that turns out.
There you go. And Estelyn Burkholder wants to know your favorite episode.
My favorite episode of...
I'm assuming Stargate.
Stargate? I would say my favorite episode was Ripple Effect. Just because it was very satisfying to write. And it's one of those episodes that's just kind of completely bonkers. That sees there's a mishap with the gate, and various alternate SG-1 teams start arriving at our SGC, and we have to deal with it. And we end up crossing paths with a dark side SG-1 team and matching wits with them. And that was just, I look back on that one. That was a lot of fun to write and a lot of fun to watch as well.
All right. And
Joe,
go ahead, Joe.
Can I? Yeah, just maybe you could. There's a lot of Stargate fans who have not watched Dark Matter yet.
Oh,
and maybe you could explain. Well, there's some haven't, but maybe you could explain how you got greenlit a Dark Matter Stargate crossover.
Oh yeah, I mean, after Dark Matter was canceled, I ended up having some conversations with executives at MGM who floated the idea of potentially saving the series. And one of the things we talked about is the potential of bringing back Dark Matter and doing possibly a bit of a crossover with some Stargate characters, which appealed to me. I thought made sense because from a tonal standpoint, if you loved SG-1 and Atlantis, you should really check out Dark Matter because it's got that sense of humor, that kind of fun sci-fi. And unfortunately, it never panned out, but it was very seriously under consideration for a while. So check out Dark Matter if you're a Stargate fan or a Farscape fan who has yet to see Dark Matter. Rectify that immediately, and then join us.
I didn't mean there was a lot. I mean, there's some who hadn't seen.
Yeah, and then join us every Monday night with the gang at Orville Nation, where we discuss an episode every Monday.
There you go. And I did share the link earlier, and I believe it will be in the description as well. So if you guys should check out Orville Nation if you haven't already. Straight White Mage asks, I want Stargate Worlds, the online MMO, to come back. Let fans build their own stories and universe. That's more of a statement than a question, but is that kind of what you guys are working on now, or is it something completely different?
I'm not familiar with the MMO.
No, that would probably be its own thing. But I agree completely with the statement. So it's well stated.
Yeah.
It is indeed. So do we have any more super chats, Tom? I think I saw one.
I think there's one, at least one or two more here. Yeah. Diego Flores sends in another one. As a sci-fi fan, I wish to know, do you see the possibility of a space opera series actually being made in the current era, or due to the beer bug, that kind of show is not possible to be produced? Well,
it's actually totally possible to be produced in terms of production. I think a spaceship-based series would probably be the easiest to produce because you're dealing with a set amount of characters on one set, as opposed to going out into crowds or what have you. So with regards to the pandemic reasoning, it's very doable. In general, though, I think buyers tend to be very leery of space operas, far future. They tend to prefer more near future sci-fi along the lines of a Black Mirror, which is too bad. I love Black Mirror, but I do love space opera as well.
Speaking of other shows that you're not working on, what's something that you're not working on currently that you're a big fan of? And it doesn't have to be sci-fi, obviously, but just what's something that you're really into, just out of curiosity lately? Even a couple things, if not.
That's a very tough question because I always get this question, and honestly, for a guy who works in television, I really need to watch more television. I just finished watching a show called in Japanese is Arisu and Borderland on Netflix, which I loved. To be honest with you, I'm a big anime guy. So my wife and I are rewatching the original Neon Genesis Evangelion. So that's what we're doing. I tend to read a lot, although I've read less this year. I tend to watch more anime, which I've done quite a bit of this year. Doro Hedoro, The Promised Neverland. I don't know if it probably means anything to you, but all great anime shows. And in terms of live action television, it's tough. I mean, I watched The Queen's Gambit, which I liked. It's not a show that I don't think I would be suited for, but I really enjoyed it. I've been trying to sort of work my way through some horror movies. They always put out those lists of top 10 horror movies, and then you watch them, and you're like, yeah. What did I watch? I watched 3 horror movies. One of them was actually, I think it was either Swedish or Norwegian.
Oh, which one? Now I'm interested. Which one was
it? Kokori Kokoda?
The end of there sounded Swedish, but
His House on Netflix, which actually was a pleasant surprise. I did like, and then a couple of other ones that I would not recommend. So I try to sort of watch a bit of everything. If you guys have something to recommend, I'd love to hear it.
Cobra Kai.
Yeah, a friend of mine
got karate.
Recommended Cobra Kai.
All that matters. No, I'm just kidding.
A friend of mine recommended Cobra Kai.
I almost did we have a joke around here when you were talking about your one show. I almost asked, but it doesn't have karate in it because that's one of our ongoing shows.
Yeah. And then, of course, I see you're a fan of Judge Dredd, which is.
I love Judge Dredd.
Which is one of Andre's favorites. Yeah,
absolutely. Both the comics and the 2012 movie.
The 2012 movie is actually one of my favorites. It's a I would argue sort of an overlooked gem. It really is great.
Absolutely. It's such a shame that the marketing from Lionsgate at the time were a complete bomb factory, utterly dropped the ball so badly.
Well, I do hear a TV series is in the works.
It was. I happen to know a little bit about it, and they're back to square one after going in huge circles. And I
actually reached out to the producer. Just because we follow each other on Twitter, and I'm like, hey, I hear you're working on a Judge Dredd series. If I can be of help in any way.
You know what? If you reach out, you may just find that maybe, I don't know what's going on right now in this moment, but I know that as of a few months ago, they were back to square one. They had to start over completely. So if you were to reach out, you never know. You never know because back to square one there. I don't know if they have found anyone new to take over or something, but they might be interested. So that's one tip I can give.
Thank you.
Yeah.
Good to know.
Yeah. And with that, we are caught up on Super Chat. So I would like to thank you for taking the time to join us today. It's been an absolute blast and an honor to have you on. And also, thank you to Orville Nation for joining us, for setting this up. And of course, everyone here, you like this, you should check out Orville Nation because Joseph, you appear on there from time to time. So give us the pitch.
I'm on Twitter under Baron Destructor. So if you had questions that didn't get answered, you can come hit me up on Twitter and I'll try to field them to the best of my ability.
There you go. Just don't be a jerk. So no, we really want to thank you guys for helping us out today, and it's been a pleasure talking to you, Joseph. It's always fun to talk to somebody who's in the industry, and especially somebody who's had a long career like yourself in sci-fi. Especially, It's always a pleasure to get to pick the brain of somebody who knows what it's like on the inside.
Well, my pleasure. Thank you.
And
Thanks for having me.
Joe is so prolific. He works so much that he might surprise us all of a sudden, like he said, like something you wrote 7 years ago. So who knows what he's got up his sleeve.
Or I'll give it all up and raise llamas for a living. I don't know. We'll see how it goes.
All right. Well, we'll be back here hopefully this afternoon talking about Mandalorian. So you guys want to check back for that. Otherwise, we'll see you Monday morning for Midnight's Edge in the morning. Until then, everybody take care and take care of yourself.